Greetings, Geeklings, and welcome back to the Geek Shyamalan here with another exciting trailer reaction video. We've had a lot of these lately, mostly because I was just missing trailers as they were coming out as I suffered from the death. So we're going to try to keep a little bit more on it now, and I am very excited about this one because it is for the upcoming movie Glass. But before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so that you can always be a part of Geek Nation. Now, for those of you who are going, what is Glass? I will tell you. It is a sequel to Unbreakable, a movie that came out in the 90s, maybe? Late 90s, early 2000s? I'd have to double check. But it was a M. Night Shyamalan movie starring Bruce Willis as David Dunn, a character who is the sole survivor of a devastating train crash. Not just the sole survivor, but walks away completely untouched. Elijah Glass is played impeccably by Samuel L. Jackson as the man who comes to him and proposes the theory that he survived and walked away because he might in fact be a superhero. And it becomes this really interesting story about the roles that heroes in mythology play in our lives and the way we see the world, the way we sort of understand ourselves and our memories and the choices we make. But ultimately it is sort of secretly a superhero origin story. And spoiler alert here, so this movie is a sequel. If you've not seen Unbreakable and you're thinking, wow, that rambling, terrible explanation piqued my interest enough I might want to, you might want to stop here because the sequel here is totally dependent on you knowing how the story ends. Alright, warning's over, so we're jumping right into spoiler territory. So at the end of the movie, Bruce Willis's character, who has started to come around to Glass's point of view and is even kind of collaborating with him a little bit, trying to figure out, well, how do I enact superheroics onto the world, understanding now that I have these powers. He finds out at the end game that Elijah Glass was actually responsible for not just the train crash, but for several other acts of terrorism, essentially, that cost hundreds and hundreds of lives in his pursuit of purposely trying to find a hero. I keep calling him Elijah Glass. That's not his name. His nickname was Mr. Glass growing up. It's kind of important for the story because he has a rare genetic disorder that makes his bone density very, very low. He's very fragile. So that means that he can essentially shatter like glass. So all the kids kind of use Mr. Glass as a way to make fun of him. But then as he grows up and as he monologues to Bruce Willis at the end of the first movie, his discovery of a real-life superhero has helped him discover his place in the world, and naturally, it is being the archenemy to a superhero. And he even sort of latches on to that idea that the kids called him Mr. Glass as sort of like, of course, like foreshadowing for my villainy. That is now my villain name. So that's sort of where that story leaves off. The movie has a bit of like a womp-womp ending, just in that they don't show the ending. It's some title cards, but ultimately, you know, David turns him into the police. The police find the evidence and arrest him, and he's put in I think a mental institution for the criminally insane. I don't think it was a prison per se, but we're about to watch this trailer for the sequel, so I guess we're going to find out. Other interesting note, if you saw the movie Split with James McAvoy, that was, as you discovered, I think it was the end credits scene where they talk about what happened, and there's like a waitress, I think, in the restaurant, and she makes a reference to Mr. Glass, and then we get like David Dunn in the background at the diner, so dun dun dun, suddenly we know we're in the world of Unbreakable. So they're establishing this sort of movie universe now as this place where these ideas of good versus evil might have these sort of really like intrinsic or maybe even supernatural roots. So I guess the Glass is going to be the thing that ties those two movies together for us much more effectively than just a cut scene where you're kind of like, oh, I guess they're related. Because if you hadn't seen Unbreakable, probably that scene didn't mean anything to you. And that's fine. Like, it's totally fine to do a little bit of that lip service to the fans who are going to get it and have that yes, yes moment. But I'm interested to see how they're going to bridge this now. So let's see what we can glean from our trailer.
It's amazing to meet you. It is simply extraordinary.
You're welcome.
Maybe this will all make sense if I explain who I am.
My name is Dr. Ellie Staple, and I'm a psychiatrist.
And
my
name
work
means nothing to me
concerns a
so
particular
far.
type of delusion of grandeur. It's a growing field.
Okay, so
I
definitely
specialize
study
in those
villains.
individuals who believe they are superheroes.
Good for you.
The three of you've convinced yourselves you have extraordinary gifts like something out of a comic book. David Dunn, the only person to survive that train wreck all those years ago.
What do you do?
I'm in security.
You think you have superpowers.
It's a feeling. Vision. I have to touch them.
You believe you are a protector.
My name is Patricia.
I have no question. There are 24 identities
I'm Mary Reynolds. Por favor, señora. We almost got you, bro.
that live in that body with you.
The beast is coming any minute now for you guys.
But what I am questioning is your belief that you are something more than human.
And yet, it is true.
My bones break easily. I've had 94 breaks in my life.
But you have an extraordinary IQ.
This is not a cartoon. This is the real world.
No way.
And yet, some of us still don't die with bullets. Some of us can still bend steel. I've been waiting for the world to see that we exist. May I meet the beast? I hope for your sake that he likes you. That sounds like the bad guys teaming up. A lot of people are going to die. Don't do this. Are you ready?
What do we call you, sir?
First name, Mr. Last name, Glass.
Oh man, so that was intriguing. Okay, wow. There is just so much going on here. So right away, the thing that kind of struck me is there's this pretty young woman coming in talking about she's really interested in a specific type of psychosis and studying people delusions of grandeur, which immediately in my brain just went to like the Harley Quinn origin story in Batman the Animated Series, which is unfair because it makes it kind of sound like I'm saying it's stolen from that, or maybe that's just not an original idea. That was sort of my immediate connection was, how are we going to bring these characters together by finding another character as sort of a common point that she sees them all meeting at. So that's going to be very interesting. Another thing we get here, she's talking to the three guys. So it's pretty clear how Glass and, oh God, is it Kevin or Dennis? I forget which one is James McAvoy's main personality. But, dude from Split, how they're all there. Why David Dunn is here?
Believe they are superheroes.
Yeah, so why he's here and why he's chained up, I don't know. At the end of Unbreakable, he turns in Mr. Glass, and that's it. We don't see him again. And then even at the end of Split, he's just like, in his work outfit, his little security shirt, like at a diner. So clearly he's not arrested then, because later in the scene, they show him in a sort of signature poncho, which if you haven't seen Unbreakable, you just need to. It's amazing. The cinematography is great. One of the best choices they make in that movie is he wears his security guard's poncho that's part of his uniform, which has this fantastic modern cape imagery. And he's still rocking it years later, which I'm loving. But the shot where you kind of see him, he sort of almost looks like the killer from I Know What You Did Last Summer. You see him just like throw someone into a wall there. I'm going to guess they're using this idea that he's still practicing as a hero to bridge that something happens, he gets caught and arrested. It is interesting that he's the one that's chained down, and I know it's because he has this incredible super strength, but he also seems like he's definitely the least threatening of the people there. Like maybe from a physical standpoint, Eli is not going to be that threatening because he can't really like come at you the same way, but he can get inside your brain. So I'm interested to see what David Dunn does that gets him done put in that spot he done in. I'm also interested to find out this woman's origin story. I know we probably won't get a ton of it. It's not the focus of the movie, but how she got to this point where she wanted these three people together. Because when you see something like this, I feel like it always either turns out it's someone who has, opinion A about someone, and then by the end of realizing they don't know what the hell they're talking about, their opinion changes. Like in the episode of the Batman the Animated Series, where there's I think she's a prosecutor, she's really anti-Batman, but then when she gets kidnapped into Arkham Asylum and Batman gets put on trial, she realizes that he is not the one who was creating the villains the way she thought, but that his existence was necessitated by their level of just delusion. So it could go in one of those directions. Certainly there was a part later that kind of looked like maybe he was saving her, so maybe she'll have a oh wow, you really do have superpowers moment. Or this will turn out that she's part of some bigger plot to bring people together. And definitely we got that reference between Glass and Kevin saying that, this looks like the bad guys teaming up. So it'll be interesting to see what her role in this is, and hopefully it's something a lot more satisfying than we needed a reason for the three of them to be together. So let's just skip ahead a little bit, see what we got. So comic books are a really big part of the movies in a really interesting way. At the beginning of Unbreakable, there's this title card that has a lot of reading, especially for one screen, and it gives all these statistics about comic books, which is really interesting just as a general, oh, okay. I would personally think interesting for anyone, especially because I'm sure that more and more we think of books, but comic books potentially as a dying art, at least at the time the movie was made. So seeing all those numbers was interesting, but honestly was a little off-putting even as someone who likes comic books, because I'm I wonder how many people went into Unbreakable not realizing that, surprise, it's a superhero origin story, and then saw that screen and were like, what the hell is going on with this movie? But essentially, in sort of quick background in that, or refresher for those of you who might have known, Elijah, because of his injuries and his illness, spent so much time in bed and reading growing up, he came up with this theory that he thinks that comic books are a over-evolved, over-glamorized, over-commercialized, over-cartoonized version of real-life mythology, and that there were and still are people who have these sort of extraordinary gifts, and then just over time, the telling of these stories evolved into the sort of histrionic, hyper-stylized genre that we see often in comics. And so that idea is still really interesting. And certainly the fact that despite the number of horrible things he did to find David, he found David, it does create that sort of, well, where do these stories come from? It actually kind of parallels for me another comic book, and James McAvoy was in the horrible movie adaptation. Not horrible because of him, just because they ruined the story. But the movie Wanted was based on one of my favorite comics, and a fantastic one, and they completely ruined it in the movie. So if you've only seen the movie, you wouldn't know this. But in the comic book, the world is being ruled essentially by the supervillains. And you find out that the supervillains did such an effective job of wiping out superheroes before sort of taking over in this kind of creepy Illuminati-esque way, that superheroes are only remembered in comic books. People don't even realize anymore that they were ever real. But they were, but their story has become part of this mythology. And the role of comic books as mythology and commentary on human society is very salient. It always has been, but I'd say even more nowadays, not just because of the plethora of comic book movies we're seeing, but the directions we're seeing them go in. I'm really fascinated to see how they bring that idea back in and how they connect that idea of, mythology sort of guiding the way stories are told, and the way stories are told not necessarily reflecting a different version of reality. Oh boy, let's see what happens next. We've got Glass, they're going back to the history. Oh yeah, so here's the scene where it looked like, oh, what do you do? And he's like, I'm in security, ha ha ha, euphemism.
I'm in security.
You think you have superpowers?
It's a feeling. Vision. I have to touch them.
Oh, okay. So maybe that's how the two of them both end up there. I didn't catch before that was him. Okay, but that makes a lot of sense then, actually. So part of his superpowers, part of what probably made him a really good security guard is that he would get what he thought were just kind of feelings or hunches from bumping into people, and which he discovers and develops into realizing if he bumps into someone who is sort of criminal, which is very selective and interesting superpower, but whatever, it moves the plot forward, right? He's able to see their crimes, and so that kind of helps him to choose how to sort of enact his superheroing in when he doesn't like fly and have superheroing like other heroes, and he doesn't have the resources for a bat computer. So it looks like he bumps into Kevin, Dennis, I don't know, Patricia, whichever one, and discovers he has the girls hostage. So I'm going to guess that the altercation between the two is what's going to bring all three of them together ultimately. But yeah, this is so interesting. They bring Anya Joy-Taylor's character from Split back in. So she's like, the last girl who survives, of course, because there always has to be a last girl in these. But it's interesting that they bring her back. And one of the cool things I guess they can do with it is because he's got multiple personalities living inside of him, is she had positive relationships with some of them. So I wonder if they're bringing her back because there's something specific going on, or we're going to find out that her character is just as bizarre as we've always kind of noticed, and she's just been voluntarily visiting to see Hedwig, which is the little boy character. So I don't know, but that will be interesting to see if her place there is she's always been a part of the story because, I don't know, some kind of weird Stockholm syndrome, or if they bring her in because they're trying to get to something inside of him to find out more about the Beast. So that's a fascinating touch, but I like bringing it together. It also looks like a little later here when you see a group of them. Oh, it is. Okay, I'm going to go back.
Steel.
So there's David. Okay, so that one guy all the way on the left is David's son.
Steel.
Yeah, in the first movie, in Unbreakable, was very convinced that Elijah's theory was right and that his dad had a superhero, and when David finally kind of accepts who he is and goes and does his first act of heroing, he, in this very adorable scene, like it's actually super heartwarming in a weird way, sort of clandestinely tells his son, you were right and I did this. And you just see the son like sitting there crying these silent tears, and he's so proud of his dad and he's so hyped. And it's a really cool moment, and I love the way it developed their relationship. So I'm super jazzed that he's back representing Team David. We've got our friend from Split here who, however, she keeps getting dragged back into the situation, here she is. And then Elijah's mom, who I'm actually interested to see again, because watching her development, even though she's not in the movie a lot in Unbreakable, but seeing sort of that horror at the beginning when she's like, oh, why's my baby crying a lot? And then finding out like all his bones are broken, which later finds out, he's got this disease, to seeing her dealing with him as a teenager and trying to use comic books as a gift to encourage his curiosity to leave the house, to seeing her reflect on how proud she is of everything he's overcome as an adult. She seems like a great mom, and she tried really, really hard, and she always did the best she could for and by him. So I am very curious to see sort of her perspective on the truth about him coming out and what his life is like now that he's in some kind of institution. So that I'm just curious about.
I've been waiting for the world to see that we exist.
Okay, so again, Elijah's definitely the driving force here in his theories and understanding of how he thinks the world works and wanting to push that into some sort of known territory. So it really is like this guy wanting to bring comic books to life, which is what we saw in the first one. But now we're really seeing that grow in a grand scale. Now he sees himself as part of it. And that, I think, is interesting because it will surely develop on that last conversation he and David have at the very, very end of Unbreakable, where he sort of posits himself as the villain, as the antithesis. So I'm really interested to see how all that sort of psychosis in the meantime is going to bridge those movies and what his plans are here. The Beast, too. The Beast in Split is just sort of weird and interesting, and some of the like superhero theories about split personalities and that's like its own whole series of videos. So seeing how this all ties together will be really interesting. Seeing look at that, some jumping action shots. Let's take that again. So yeah, there he is in his superheroing outfit. Yeah, and he's underwater at one point. So cool. So okay, so definitely it's hard to tell though, because those images there, because he had the shirt off, we know he takes the shirt off later when he's the Beast. I'm going to assume that's a later in the film, like hero-villain conflict, and not what kind of puts them together like we saw at the beginning where David bumps into him and sees he's got those cheerleaders tied up. What's interesting, that's going to be kind of fun to see, is there was that scene where they're fighting underwater. David's weakness is water, and he's become phobic of it because in his childhood, like, he almost died from being underwater for a long time, and he got really bad pneumonia from it, and he was declared dead but somehow survived. So one of the things that's always interesting with heroes is to see them go up against their weakness. And so now that, you know, we've had our origin story and we're getting the hero back, he's going to be exposed to his weakness again. But I'm curious, with all the time that's passed between these movies, are we going to see that it's something he's worked out in some way? Has he gotten better to it? Or is it going to be like a kryptonite sort of thing where it just always has the same effect? So there are a lot of sort of unanswered questions that you don't even realize you have at the end of Unbreakable until, no, that's fine, until you think about it a little and you go back to it. So I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with this. And I strongly recommend Unbreakable if you have not seen it. Hopefully, if you haven't seen it and decided you wanted to, you stopped before you got to this point, or you decided that the spoilers weren't enough to ruin it for you, because really, they're not. It's a beautiful movie. It's a great script. It's M. Night Shyamalan at his best before The Happening happened and everything else that followed. So I'm hoping that this maybe can be a movie that brings him back, because we're revisiting awesome characters and an awesome premise. And hopefully this is kind of what we all need to tie this universe together. So I will definitely be keeping an eye out for this movie as we're learning more. It's coming out in January, so it'll be like a birthday gift to me, hopefully close enough to my birthday. And I will definitely do a follow-up for it to react to the film, because I'm just super jazzed about this. We just watched Unbreakable last night. I mean, it's going to be great. So I'm really excited to see where this story goes. You guys have been great. I hope you enjoy it. I can't wait to see what the rest of the internet thinks about this movie. And I'll see you guys next time on the Geek Channel and Harriet.